Welcome to episode 3 of Building the Board, as we're going to talk about our first set of big uglies, offensive tackles. Now, we've got Quinten Krzysko and we've got Jacob Infante here with us, so I'll throw it over to them as we dive into 10 prospects and get to know everybody a little bit better.
Yeah, glad to be here talking about offensive tackles. Big guys, the biggest athletes on the field, ready to get going. How you doing, Jacob?
I'm doing great. I'm excited about this group too, especially from a Bears perspective. I mean, offensive line is one of the biggest needs this year. So I'm definitely interested in this class and I've been paying a lot of attention. So I'm excited to get into it.
Yeah, I figured we'd just go ahead and start off with top of a lot of people's boards, Paris Johnson Jr.
Yeah.
I'll just go ahead and jump in on him. Played some left guard at Ohio State before moving to left tackle this past year. When I watch him, I mean, I just see smooth athlete, easy adjuster. He's not always in the right place at the right time, but his recovery ability is just special in my eyes. How loose his hips are, his ability to cover ground laterally, and if he's a half second late on something, for it to not cost him because he has the length, has the speed, has the agility to go make up for it. I mean, there was one play that I saw where it was like, I didn't know how it was possible he covered the ground he did to make up for a misstep. Now, on some of the negative, he's not the most experienced tackle, so because he played interior earlier in his career, so just kind of learning the position a little more. But that's really, I mean, I thought his tape was pretty clean, if I'm being completely honest. What do you think?
Yeah, no, I agree with a lot of that. I think, like, from a physical perspective, he's a prototypical offensive lineman. The length, the pure size, the speed, the power. It's just really an impressive prospect. I think he's got a very high ceiling at the next level. I'd like to see him work on getting a little bit more bend in his knees, but I think at that point you're just, still looking at someone with a super high ceiling who can be like a long-term left tackle for quite some time. I have him as, I mean, it depends on if you consider Peter Skoronski a tackle or not. For the sake of this, we have him at IOL. But if that's the case, then Paris Johnson's definitely my top tackle in this class. Very big fan of his. I'm excited to see where he ends up because I think he could go as high as top 10. I think the upside with him is really, really high.
Yeah, I think you're looking at a potential top 10 pick with him. Absolutely. Right now, I got him graded just inside a top 15 grade. So top 10 is, I could see him gone at 6, 7, 8, anywhere after that. Next up here, wanted to get into Tennessee offensive tackle Darnell Wright, guy who I think has the best hands in the class among the offensive tackles. I mean, he is so refined and so well studied with what his opponents are trying to do to him and his hands are, right there processing with his brain, and his feet tend to stay with his hands and his hips. He just stays all in a line. It's just very technically sound. And really the thing that stands out to me is his prior years prior to last year, he had ups and downs, right? Ups and downs. And he was talking, it might've been after one of the Senior Bowl practices, talking about how he started putting together Excel spreadsheets, and, me being an Excel guy, I'm all about it, but Excel spreadsheets about his opponents and tracking what they do and how he's going to counter it. And I imagine that's something they started doing more heavily prior to this past year because the improvement was clear, and putting in that work, to me, it says that that's something that's going to be sustainable for him to carry into the league, because it's, as long as he keeps doing that work, we've seen the results with him. Now, he's not the quickest mover. Feet are a little slower. His recovery is a bit more limited in the feet, but I think his hands are so good that it's something he's going to be able to overcome. What do you think, Jacob?
Yeah, I mean, so I agree with a lot of that. I think that it's a good point you bring up with the hands. The thing that I really believe is I think he has the strongest anchor out of the offensive tackles in this class. I think, he's just a really densely built guy. He's like 6'5", measured at the Senior Bowl at like 340. So you're looking at a guy where, okay, he could maybe afford to lose a little bit of weight, and I think that would make him more athletic, and I think that would help him out with recovery, like you mentioned. But from a pure play strength perspective, how he uses his hands and just the overall power and the coordination at the point of attack, he's got a very strong core. He's a guy that, you project him at right tackle. That's where he played. I think there's a very intriguing ceiling with him. I don't know if he goes round 1. I have more as a round 2 type of guy, but I also think he's going to contribute right away. Kind of scheme versatile. I mean, I don't want to say he's a perfect fit for a wide zone scheme just because he's not the best athlete, like you said. But I think with him, he's a good enough prospect where you can kind of look the other way with that. So, yeah, I'm right there with you. There's actually a guy I wanted to bring up here because we're talking about athleticism. And the main guy that comes out to me is Broderick Jones out of Georgia. That in pound for pound, he might end up testing the best of any offensive lineman in the combine this year. And I'm excited to see what he ends up with from, not just a 40 perspective, but his 10-yard splits and his agility numbers. I think they're going to be through the roof. I think he's another guy who uses his hands very well. Not the biggest dude out there. I'd like to see him add a little bit more strength, like pure muscle to his frame, because he can get pushed back in the pocket sometimes. But, I mean, if you want an athletic offensive lineman, he's going to be as good as you can get. Lateral agility is phenomenal. Acceleration to the second level is impressive. Very good body control. So he's not just like this uncoordinated, just straight line explosive bull in a china shop where he doesn't really know what he's doing. He's just a very precise and very fluid athlete. So I'm very excited to see where he ends up and also what he measures. I'm interested in seeing what his arm length is because he wasn't listed as being a super big athlete, but I think his arm length is going to make up for that. So I'm curious what you think about him because he's someone that I think is going to go round 1 and I'd be shocked if he falls out of the top 20.
I think he is one of the most fun players to watch. I mean,
This
is I have in my notes here. He is a brick wall when his hands and feet are connected. Mm-hmm. When everything is where it's supposed to be, he's just tough to get by. But that brings to the point, his hands and feet are often disjointed. Like his hands will land outside, his feet will get left behind on occasion. It's more processing than athletic, right? It's more he's a little bit raw with some of that stuff. But then you see, like we were talking in the tight end episode about Darnell Washington and how the Georgia offense, so much of their offense was runs and then tunnel screens out to wide receivers with the tight ends getting out to block a corner or a safety or a linebacker. Broderick Jones did some of that too. I mean, he was moving out to get a hat on a cornerback on a screen pass. Like that's not something you typically ask a tackle to do. He's a special athlete. There's no question about that. I like what you said about getting a little more sand in his pants. I think that would help his anchor some because it's clear that he's strong. Upper body strength is there and he has functional lower body strength, but I think he can just add a little more. And his anchor could become something that's really dominant at that point. But there's a lot to be excited about with Broderick Jones. And I think he's a first round lock. It's probably not like top 10, but like anywhere between 11 and like 20 to 25, I think is fair game for him.
No, absolutely.
Yeah. And then next up here, I got one of my favorites, Matthew Bergeron out of Syracuse. At the Senior Bowl, we saw him playing inside and outside. I think that there's no reason to move him inside unless you just draft him at great value and think that, we're just going to put him inside because we don't need a tackle right now. But then you still know he can go back outside to play tackle. I believe he has left-right versatility as well, experience playing on both left tackle and right tackle. And when I was watching his tape, I was impressed by the efficiency of his feet quite a bit. He was just very, always low to the ground, always his steps were always the same size and always just getting to where he needed to be on time. But there was some stuff that I saw in there too that was kind of like made me question, how's his anchor? How much power is he really bringing in his punch and in his in that ability to really displace people as well in the run game? And my questions were answered at the Senior Bowl. I mean, he was dominating folks out there on certain reps, and I came away very impressed with him and higher on him than I was going in. What do you think of Bergeron?
Yeah, so I share some of the same strengths and weaknesses with Bergeron. I think that, at least in my opinion, I was maybe a little bit higher on just the pure strength. I think it's a matter of fully unlocking it. because I think sometimes like his punches land a little bit errant sometimes, and there were some instances, especially earlier on in his career, where he struggled a little bit with with pad level and having that a bit higher center of gravity, even though he's not like the tallest offensive lineman out there. I mean, I think he got better in terms of pad level over time. He's a very good athlete, plays hard. I really like what he brings to the table in pass pro. And, I agree with you. I think he showed up really well at the Senior Bowl. He's someone I'm taking on day 2, probably. I don't think he's a round 1 prospect, but I think that you're looking at probably like a mid-second round type of guy. I think that's probably where I'll end up having him when it's all said and done. But regardless, I think he can play inside or outside. Just regardless, a solid plug and play player just because of what he brings athletically. And if you develop some of the technical refinements in his game and improve the processing just a little bit, I think he can be a long-term starter. So I want to shift gears to a totally different guy. And I don't think there's any offensive lineman really like this guy in this class. It's DeJuan Jones out of Ohio State.
There might only be a few in the NFL like him.
Oh, yeah. And I mean, for our purpose of putting together a Bears draft board, I don't know how highly DeJuan Jones is going to rank because he's not a good fit in this scheme. I'm just going to say that right out of the gate. He's not super athletic. I mean, he's a good athlete for his size, but it's a matter of, do you want to have an offensive lineman who's a good athlete for his size or just a good athlete, period? And I don't think that DeJuan Jones fits the latter. But, all that aside, it's not to hate on the guy. I think, he's obviously massive. The length is unbelievable. The sheer size is fantastic. Once he locks down his strikes and once he gets his hands inside you, it's game over. Because he's so much longer than everyone else he goes up against. He's so much bigger and stronger than everyone he goes up against. I think it's kind of going to be scheme dependent where he ends up. I only think some teams are going to be interested in him just because he's not super versatile in that regard. But if you want just a giant dude who can just displace people, I think DeJuan Jones is going to be your guy. So I think he's a day 2 guy. Might sneak into late round 1, depending on the scheme fit. If someone values him high enough, I have him as like a day 2, round 2 prospect in terms of just grades, but I could see someone falling in love with him just because of the tools for sure. So I'm curious what you think about him.
I think he's one of the more interesting prospects in the class because you're talking about a guy who can just flat out dominate, right? Flat out just take people out of the game. But he's also 380 pounds or so, and not many frames are built to hold up at 380 pounds. And I think that's going to factor in his draft position. Like, I have him graded out as a high 2nd round pick right now, but I'm not sure if he's going to go that early, just because I think teams are going to look at him and say he's going to have stress fractures in his feet by his 4th year. Unless he can drop weight, which is another question that, can he drop weight? If he can, he becomes a lot more interesting to me as, I mean, what's the breaking point? If you're sitting here saying this guy might only have a 4-year NFL career, what's the point in a draft where there's value there, where you're saying, like, I'm willing to take a really good right tackle for 3 years for a 4th round pick? Or is it a 3rd round pick? Is a 2nd round pick too rich for that? And I think that's the big question I get to with him, because you're right. He's probably not the best scheme fit, but I feel really good about him pass protecting for Justin Fields, even if he's not the best run blocker in that scheme. I keep going back and forth on him. Like, if he's there in the 3rd round, I'm sitting here right now saying, like, the Bears should take him. It's great value in the 3rd round. No. But then I'm also kind of like, I don't know, because I have serious concerns about his playing weight and whether that's sustainable. But I love him as a player. I think he is one of the most fun guys to watch in the offensive tackle class. Moving on here to a very different player. I think DeJuan Jones is just one of a kind. So we could say that with just about whoever was next. But Anton Harrison, left tackle out of Oklahoma. When I watch Anton Harrison, I see a lot of upside. But I also see a lot that still needs to be refined. Like, he's smooth. He usually gets out of reps clean, but there are just a few times every game where I'm like, I don't know. I don't know about that. Like it's almost like a little piece of the puzzle just feels like it's missing there. The athleticism's there, the footwork is there, the hand placement is hit or miss, and I'm just I see that this guy can be a really good tackle with the right coaching and the right development, but I'm not sure that it's an automatic either. So right now I'm sitting at him with a mid-second round grade. But what do you got, Jacob?
That's about where I have him right now, honestly. And I share a lot of, the same concerns, but also see a lot of the same strengths with him. I think, very good athlete, another coordinated pass protector who I think can, shift direction very well for his size. Good run blocker on the move. I think that's really going to help him out. I don't think he's the strongest guy in this class. And I think some of it comes down to, pad level can be a bit hit or miss. Hand placement, I think, has shown some flashes, but I think he's still a work in progress in terms of making that a consistent strength in his game. And, again, we keep using the phrase, light in the pants or adding a little more sand to the pants, whatever. That's just basically like we want his anchor to get stronger. Mm-hmm. And, I think that's what we're looking at with Anton Harrison. But, a very good athlete, coordinated guy. I have him round 2. I feel like, and correct me if I'm wrong or if you disagree, but I feel like if you can't get Broderick Jones in round 1, that Anton Harrison in round 2 is a pretty good consolation prize. I mean, it depends on where those guys go, obviously, but I think that, if you're looking for offensive linemen, if you're looking for similar upside and stuff like that, I think that certainly could be a lot worse.
Yeah, I mean, I think that that's kind of how Broderick Jones is probably looking for a more athletic offensive tackle who can get out and move some. I think Anton Harrison can do a little of that. I think Matt Bergeron could do a little of that too. I think either of those guys would be a solid consolation prize.
Yeah, I'm a fan of Harrison. I think he's a solid round 2 guy. Someone a little bit farther down my board who I think also brings a considerable amount of upside. I'm looking at Wanya Morris out of Oklahoma, and he's someone that, I've tweeted this before, I've written this, and I've said this in a podcast, when I was, on with you and Robert. This guy kind of screams Chicago Bear to me in terms of what this current regime is looking for. I mean, he's got length for days. He's very athletic. An interesting thing about him, his weight's been fluctuating a little bit over the course of his collegiate career. Played pretty heavy at Tennessee, but lost some weight at Oklahoma. I think there's still quite a bit to work on with him. I think, center of gravity is a little bit high, but he changes direction very well. And I think that once he gets the technical refinement down in his game, works on his strike placement, maybe just a little bit more, and add a little bit more strength to his anchor and work on the spatial awareness. I think physically, Wanya Morris is one of the most interesting prospects at offensive tackle in this class. So you combine that with the fact that he blocks with a motor, he plays hard, and that's something that I think not just the Bears, but a lot of NFL teams will be interested in. A guy who's long, athletic, and plays hard. You can work with that. It's if the guy has the effort and he has physical tools to work with, then you're convinced that you can teach him to be much more than what he is right now. So Wanya Morris, a guy I kind of have a fringe day 2, early day 3 on him. I think probably early round 4 is where I'm going to end up on him. So yeah, I'm curious what you have to say about him, because I think that if you're looking for upside and you want to wait a little bit, then Morris could be really a good prospect to take a look at down the line.
Yeah, I mean, this is one of the guys that one of the I guess sleepers, you could say, I've been a little higher on since I started the process. And a big part of that is just I put on his tape and there's too many plays where I'm going, whoa, where he's having those wow dominant moments. Now, he's also having a lot of those really flawed moments. And it's about maybe you can take away some of the dominant and take away more of the flawed and kind of end in the middle ground more. But he's a guy that just really stood out to me because of his smooth movement abilities, his finishing mentality, and just it's all there for him to take. That's how I feel watching him. There's moments where there's major misses, but there's just too many moments where he's too good for you to say this guy is a 5th round or a 6th round pick. He looks like a 3rd, 4th round guy to me. I have him graded a little higher than that now. I have way too many guys graded in the second round right now. In the third round, it's like I got like 50 offensive linemen in the first 75 picks. So not offensive linemen, but 50 trench guys. I need to cut back my grading a little. But he's just a guy who stood out to me. I think he got mishandled at Tennessee his first 2 years. You know, he was playing left tackle as a freshman and sophomore there, playing way too heavy, was clearly slowed down by it. Got to Oklahoma, dealt with I believe Aaron Lemming mentioned to me when I was on their podcast that he had a suspension his junior year at Oklahoma, which I wasn't aware of. So I'll have to look into that a little more and see what that was about. But he seemed like he got better every game that I watched throughout the year, I've watched 3 games of his and it went like start of the season, mid-season, end of the season. It seemed like he got better in each of those that I watched, which makes me think he's a guy who's learning the position and learning quickly after, you know, struggling early and maybe having some personal issues or some coaching issues along the line. Plus, he is named after Boys II Men singer Wanya Morris, which is just an awesome fact to have.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah, I think so. Another prospector who we're looking at who comes with that raw upside similar to Morris is Jalen Duncan out of Maryland. And Duncan is another guy who just, the second I put on his tape, I was just enamored by the athleticism and the fluidity. It was like, this guy is long, quick in his step out into pass pro, and just his recovery is very capable. You know, he can cover ground like nothing, like it's just normal. But then there's just too many lapses in that play. There's too many moments where it's like, what were you doing? Like what was happening here? And you just come away with a lot of questions. He's a prospect who I think has all the physical traits that you look for, but his pad level gets high sometimes. His hand placement is all over the place. His feet and hands don't seem to work in unison. And I just end up with a lot of question marks. He's a first round physical talent, in my opinion, but there's just a lot of work to be done with him. What do you see?
No, I'm with you every step of the way. I think that from a physical perspective, he's just about everything you want in an offensive lineman. Maybe a little thin. I think he can get stronger, but even then, some of the play strength flashes he has in his upper body are certainly impressive. Super fluid, super coordinated mover, just very good lateral quickness, changes direction super well. Blocking on the move, blocking, accelerating to the second level, just very impressive there. I agree. I think just from a technical perspective, he's not quite there. I don't think he really understands how to get full use of his physical tools at this point. I think his strike placement, can land all over the place sometimes. Pad level can improve. And, just the wideness of his base, I'd like to see some improvement there. But from a physical perspective, he's every coach's dream. So he's someone I think I agree. He's got round 1 upside, but maybe day 3 tape. So I think I'm going to narrow it down to probably early round 3, late round 2 with him. Split the difference kind of there. I think that's a fair enough spot for him just to take a shot on, just that sheer athletic upside. And, if he doesn't pan out, then you're not using a first round pick on him, at least in my opinion. I'm not using a first round pick on an offensive lineman with that low of a floor.
Yeah.
But I certainly think there are a lot of tools to like with Duncan on day 2. So another guy I want to bring up actually is Tyler Steen from Alabama. He's another Senior Bowl guy, had some experience kicking inside at the Senior Bowl as well as playing tackle. I'll admit I was a little bit, at least by my own standards, I was a little late to the party on him. I watched a little bit of his stuff from 2021, but it was really 2022 when he really got a substantial role, at least in terms of watching him on tape. And, it's like, oh, okay.
Well, so he was at Vanderbilt for 3 years before going to Bama last year. So he kind of went under the radar for a while because he was paying that close attention to Vandy,
Yeah. Yeah. No, I mean, I look at Vanderbilt and I think, that's the epitome of quality offensive line play, quality SEC football right there. But yeah, no, But again, Tyler Steen's another guy where I think from a technical perspective, still a work in progress. The pad level, center of gravity, I think he's a little too stiff in the knees for my liking. I don't think he gets a lot of bend, at least from what I've seen of him. But I do think he changes direction fairly well. I think he's got good play strength too. Whether you want to kick him inside a guard, I think he could fit there because he, at least in my opinion, he has the play strength to do it. He has the wherewithal to move guys around at the point of attack. Not the most coordinated guy out there. I think he has solid enough burst in a short area. He's a solid athlete, but I think that once you get him out in his kick slide, there are some issues with just coordination. I think that's a little bit of an issue with him. So I'd like to see him work on that, maybe get into some yoga, some programs to improve that flexibility. But there's a physical, palpable upside with him. So he's someone that I'm going to have early day 3 on. Not someone I'm taking super early just because I don't think he's going to contribute super well right away at the NFL level, but he's someone I'm looking at, maybe 2-3 years down the line to develop into a solid starter. So I'm curious, what do you have to say about him?
Yeah. So Steen, initially, when I was looking at him, I was thinking a guy you probably kick inside the guard, but I started to have some questions as I was watching some of the tape of, do you really want this guy pulling out into space? And I wasn't sure that he was best suited for that either. And I kind of came away with the thought of like, he's probably a right tackle where, he's going to get a fair amount of help if he's at right tackle from chipping tight ends or whatever it might be. But the thing that really stood out to me in his 22 tape was against Auburn, going up against Derek Hall. Early in the game, he was really struggling with the outside edge and setting that edge in the pass protection. And as the game went on, he was figuring it out, and he was getting to the point where he was just running it up behind the pocket consistently well and not giving too much inside shoulder to allow an inside move either. And that was that ability to adjust mid game is kind of what made me start thinking like, I could see him being at right tackle, and maybe he'll take a few lumps here or there, but ultimately I saw a guy who has an anchor that is just powerful. I mean, he has a wide bottom half and some serious strength to be able to just sit down and say, this is where we are. This is all we're going to do. And we're going to call it a day there, at least against college competition. And I think he has room to add more power to that, which is really intriguing to me. Now, like you said, as far as his movement abilities, he is a little stiff and he's a bit more limited there, but I thought he had enough mobility that if you wanted to put him in his own blocking scheme, he could get by just fine with it. And again, kind of like what you said, he's a flyer you take on day 3, I think. I don't think he's a guy who you're sitting here pounding the table for on day 2, but he's a guy who I think I can see some upside with that could, have some scheme versatility. And then last up here, one of my favorite guys, even though he's not a great scheme fit for the Bears, is Ryan Hayes out of Michigan. My final note in my notes here is just, this is a guy you want on your football team. Like watching him, it was just like, this guy just gets down and dirty and will fight with anybody in the trenches. And he's big, he's strong, just powerful, got some serious pop in his hands, and just he's what I think of when I think offensive lineman. It's like the way that he plays is what comes to mind for me. Now, he struggles with speed on the outside. I thought for a little bit, like maybe he could move inside to guard, but again, it kind of like I was saying with Steen, it's his movement abilities isn't that good. He's not really a guy you want pulling out into space. He's going to miss a lot of targets. You start asking him to do that, I think. Just tight hips, not really a fluid athlete, but just a powerful rock on the offensive line is all I can describe him as. What do you think, Jacob?
I think that's pretty well put, honestly. I mean, you watch him, his size just stands out. Like he's a taller guy, got, long arms, definitely has a lot of, quality experience at the collegiate level. I want to say he's going to be a 3-year starter technically. by the time now that he's graduating, because he started off in 2020 before he got hurt, and then had all of 2021 and 22 as a starter. So, he's battle tested against some of the best schools, especially playing in the Big Ten. That's a trench heavy conference. So I think you're looking at size there. I think there's some flashes in how he moves. I agree. I've had the same thoughts. Does he kick inside to guard? I wasn't 100% sure. I still have him as a tackle right now, but I wouldn't hate if a team says, okay, we don't think you have great lateral quickness. We don't think you can cover, such a large amount of space. So we're going to kick you inside and just let you just dominate people. I think that's a totally fair way to look at things. He's someone I have like early day 3 as well. There are a handful of offensive tackles in this class that I take in like that round 4 range where they could develop into something. And I think Ryan Hayes has that. He's experienced, he's powerful, he's big. Whether you have him as a tackler or guard, I think he's a solid prospect at the next level. So I agree, maybe not the best fit for the Bears, but a fun prospect nonetheless. Yeah, and that wraps up our top 10 offensive tackles. And there are a handful of guys we still didn't even get to that we'll get into, as the weeks and months progress. But I'm a fan of this class. I don't know about you, but I'm personally intrigued by a handful of dudes in this group.
I think it's pretty clear that I am a big fan of this O-line and D-line class when I say that I have 50 guys with top 75 grades in the trenches, and I need to pick through and be a bit more picky on them. But I love this tackle class. I think it's very deep, and it's going to have guys who have starter upside into day 3. And I think that wraps it up for us.